Hello, welcome to the Address of Fear. If you love horror stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you're ready, let's get started. She woke up at night with a strange sense of unease. The air in the room felt heavier than usual, the darkness more oppressive. Even before opening her eyes, she could sense that something was out of place. At first, she didn't pay much attention to these feelings. She assumed it was just fatigue, stress, or lack of sleep. But every morning, when she opened her eyes, that gnawing sensation never went away. There were small details she didn't notice at first. Her drawer was slightly open, yet every night before sleeping she would tidy up her things and put everything in its place. In the kitchen, a glass would be a few centimeters away from where she usually left it. Maybe she had placed it there without realizing it. There had to be a logical explanation, right? But one morning when she got out of bed, the fear tightening in her throat confirmed that her instincts were not wrong. The necklace on her bedside table had disappeared. It was a small silver necklace, a keepsake from her mother. She always placed it in the same spot. Now it was gone. She searched everywhere, opened drawers, checked under the bed, but it was nowhere to be found. She told herself she must have dropped it, but deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She had memorized exactly where she put her things. Still, she kept finding explanations. Maybe she had been distracted. Maybe stress was making her forgetful. But in the following days, the disappearances continued. Small things, barely noticeable at first. When one of her books went missing, she didn't realize it immediately. A few days later, when she wanted to read it, it was gone. She always arranged her books in a specific order on the shelves, but now there were gaps between them. Trying to suppress the growing unease inside her, she searched everywhere in the house. She moved the couch, rummaged through the kitchen cabinets, even checked the bathroom. But the book was nowhere to be found. Even stranger, she couldn't remember which book was missing. She knew she had flipped through its pages, read part of it, but the title, the cover, even the story itself had vanished from her mind. This only made her fear grow stronger. She started paying more attention to see if someone had been entering her home. She double-checked the locks on the door, closed all the windows, drew the curtains tightly shut. Before going to bed, she pushed the kitchen chair firmly under the table. If someone was sneaking in, the chair would have moved. But every morning, the chair was in its place. The doors were locked. Everything was exactly as she had left it. And yet, the unease in her gut never disappeared. What frightened her even more was that the missing objects were increasing in importance. First, a necklace. Then, a book. Then, a framed photograph. A childhood photo. The last time she saw it, it was on the coffee table in the living room. Now, it was gone. She tried to rationalize her fear. Maybe stress was making her forgetful. Maybe she had started sleepwalking and moving things without realizing it. But deep down, she felt it was something far more terrifying. One night, unable to sleep, she decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. It was close to 3 a.m. In those silent moments when darkness seeped into every corner of the house, she suddenly stopped. She felt like someone was watching her. Her eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness. She saw nothing in the hallway, but her heartbeat quickened. When she stepped into the living room, she sensed that something was off. She glanced at the vase on the coffee table. Had it always been this close? Wasn't the chair tucked under the table just a moment ago? For a moment, she froze. Her mind must have been playing tricks on her. But the feeling inside her whispered that someone was there, right beside her. Suddenly, she felt a breeze pass under the door, but the windows were closed. The doors were locked. And that's when she realized. It came every night. That night, before going to sleep, she made sure everything was exactly as it should be. The glass was placed perfectly in the center of the table. Her necklace was on the nightstand. The chair was tucked neatly under the table. She arranged her books carefully, checked every door and window. This time she was certain nothing would move, but the unease inside her refused to go away. When she woke up in the morning, everything seemed normal at first glance, but there was a strange emptiness inside her. As usual, the first thing she did was reach for her phone and check the time. 08:43. Then, she sat on her bed for a while, staring blankly. She knew she had something to do that day, but she couldn't remember what it was. It was as if her mind was trapped behind a thick fog. She tried to think while making coffee in the kitchen. Did she have to go to work? Was she supposed to meet someone? An inexplicable forgetfulness had settled inside her. After washing her face in the sink, she looked into the mirror. The deepening dark circles under her eyes, the paleness of her skin, and the vacant expression on her face unsettled her. It was as if she wasn't looking at herself, but at someone who looked like her, only slightly different, slightly unfamiliar. She touched her face, and her fingertips felt cold. A fear she couldn't explain began to grow inside her. That day, everything felt hazy. She sat absent-mindedly on the couch, turned on the TV but didn't even notice what was playing. It was as if her mind was floating in an empty void. She didn't even realize how time was passing. But when evening came, she suddenly jolted. The clock read 21:10. She had woken up at 8 in the morning. What about the 13 hours in between? She had no memory of how her day had passed. This wasn't normal. Forgetfulness happened sometimes, but not like this. Could a person completely forget an entire day, where they had gone, what they had done, what they had thought? The thought sent a wave of fear through her. She couldn't wait any longer. She knew something was wrong. Before nightfall, she installed a small security camera in her bedroom, positioning it so that it had a clear view of her bed. The plan was simple: to see if anything unusual happened during the night. If someone was entering her home, the camera would catch it. When night came, she turned off the lights, got into bed, and stared at the ceiling. She waited in the darkness, but she couldn't even remember if she had fallen asleep. When she opened her eyes in the morning, the same empty feeling greeted her. There were gaps in her memory. She remembered setting up the camera before sleeping. She immediately grabbed her phone and opened the app to check the footage. For the first few hours, nothing happened. She was just lying in bed, motionless. As the hours passed, there was no movement in the footage. But then, at 03:12, something changed. 12, she saw herself lying in bed, but something felt wrong. Her breathing quickened. In the footage, at exactly 03:12, her body began to move slowly, but her eyes remained closed. Her face was completely expressionless. Holding her breath, she continued watching. The her on the screen suddenly sat up, perfectly straight. But her movements were strange, too smooth, too mechanical. Then she slowly turned her head to the side. Her blood ran cold, because the her on the camera was looking directly at it. But her eyes were still closed. This was impossible. How could she know exactly where the camera was in her sleep? And then, she noticed something even more terrifying. She was smiling. A slow, eerie smile. Then, the her on the screen got out of bed. She stood up and started walking around the room. But because of the camera's angle, it was hard to see where she went. She had moved out of frame. After that, the room remained still for several minutes. Then, the camera glitched, the footage became distorted, the screen flickered, and then it completely cut out. She sat frozen, staring at the screen. The rest of the night had not been recorded. Her heart pounded in her chest. Every hair on her body stood on end. Slowly, she lifted her eyes from the screen and looked around her room. Everything seemed to be in place. But now she wasn't so sure. She had no recollection of waking up and wandering around at that hour of the night. According to the camera footage, she had gotten out of bed at 03:12, but in the morning, she had woken up lying in bed. So where had she gone during the night? And the real question, who did that smile on the camera belong to? At first, only her belongings were disappearing. But now, her memories were vanishing too. When she looked at childhood photos, some faces seemed unfamiliar. She recognized the people standing next to her, She was supposed to recognize them, but she couldn't remember their names. The memories in the photo album looked like faded frames from an erased film. A few days ago, she had recalled the name of a close friend, effortlessly, but today, when she tried to think of it, she couldn't. The word was on the tip of her tongue, but it was as if someone had scraped it out of her mind. At first, she blamed it on fatigue. Maybe she was just too stressed. But over time, forgetfulness became something more than just absent-mindedness. That morning, she went to the kitchen to have breakfast. She picked up her cup and reached for the coffee maker, but then she stopped. Something felt off. She stared at the coffee machine. For a moment, she had forgotten what she was doing there. She didn't know why she was holding the cup, why she was making coffee. She stood frozen, her mind a blank slate. And then it hit her. She didn't remember going to the store. She had gone shopping yesterday. The receipt was still in her bag, but she couldn't recall the minutes she spent at the market, the moment she paid at the register, or how she had gotten home. It was as if that entire period had been wiped from her mind. Her eyes widened. This wasn't just ordinary forgetfulness. And the worst part? These gaps were happening more frequently. At work, when someone asked her a question, she struggled to find the right words. When she hummed a familiar song, she forgot the next lyrics. It wasn't just her memories. Even recalling simple information was becoming difficult. But the most terrifying part was that she no longer remembered what she did during the night. Every morning when she woke up, the previous night was a blank, a complete void in her mind. Not even dreams remained. It was as if every night a part of her mind was being taken away, and it was getting worse. The night was cold and silent. Before sleeping, she picked up an old notebook from her bedside. She used to keep a journal, but she had stopped years ago. Now, as she flipped through the pages, she noticed something disturbing. Some pages were missing. When had that happened? The pages had been torn out. With trembling hands, she scanned the remaining entries. And then, she found a single sentence written in her own handwriting. "It has always been here." A chill ran down her spine. She didn't remember writing that. It was her own handwriting, she was sure of it. But when had she written it? Under what circumstances? And worse, who was it? Her throat went dry. She quickly shut the notebook, stood up, and began pacing around the room. She went over everything that had happened, the missing objects, the fading memories, the nights she couldn't recall. This couldn't just be simple forgetfulness. Something was happening. Something was here. And it was waiting for her to realize. That night, she felt more restless than ever. She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop. Her eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion weighed down her body. But just as she was about to drift off, she jolted awake. She heard whispers filling the room. The voice was right by her ear. "When only you remain, everything will belong to you." Her breath caught in her throat. She immediately jumped out of bed, her eyes scanning the room. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. But she was alone. She was supposed to be. Yet, the shadows whispered something different. Even when the sun rose, the darkness in the room did not completely fade. Despite the heaviness of her eyelids, the woman got out of bed. She took a deep breath, but the cold air in the room burned her lungs. She was still forgetting. Pieces of her memories were being torn away, erased from her mind, as if they had never existed. She could no longer deny it. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to watch the footage from the camera. She opened her laptop, removed the memory card from the security camera, and began reviewing the recordings. For hours, there was no movement. Just like on previous nights, she lay still in bed, unmoving in her sleep. But then, 0312 arrived, and everything changed. On the screen, she saw her own body sitting up in bed. But something was wrong. Her eyes were closed. Slowly, she straightened up. Despite having her eyes shut, she moved as if she could see everything. She tilted her head slightly to the side, and the corners of her lips curled upward. She was smiling. A deep, indescribable fear spread through her. The her on the screen was not her. Then the figure in the recording got out of bed. It walked slowly toward the desk, pulled out a pen from the drawer, and began writing something on a piece of paper. The tip of the pen pressed hard against the page, its movements too deliberate, too forceful. She leaned closer to the screen. I don't remember this. Then, the figure stepped toward the mirror. Due to the camera angle, its face wasn't entirely visible, but its reflection in the mirror could be seen. The woman's eyes drifted toward the corner of the screen, even though she knew she was about to see something she didn't want to. On the screen, her reflection in the mirror opened its eyes. But the her lying in bed still had her eyes closed. This was impossible. Her reflection, as if aware of the camera, turned to look directly into it. Its lips moved as if speaking, but the camera had recorded no sound. Desperately, she turned up the speaker volume, but there was nothing, only an agonizing silence. Yet, the figure on the screen kept speaking. The reflection in the mirror was saying something, smiling. And then, it started moving toward the camera. Suddenly, the footage began to distort. And then, the recording cut to black. She pushed herself away from the screen, her breathing erratic. Her hands covered her face as her heartbeat pounded in her ears. This wasn't just sleepwalking. This wasn't just memory loss. That thing, was that really me? She had to find out. She immediately stood up, her steps unsteady as she approached the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her with empty eyes. Her face looked paler than ever, the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced, her lips cracked and dry. But there was something else. In the corner of the mirror, faint words were etched into the glass, a message written in a pale, shaky hand. She narrowed her eyes, trying to read the letters. Keep forgetting. In the end, you will become me. Her throat tightened. She raised a trembling hand, her fingers grazing the icy surface of the mirror. Who had written this? Was it her? She had no memory of doing it. But there it was, written in her own handwriting. A deep fear settled inside her. What if the thing that stood before the mirror that night wasn't really her? What if the one who woke up every night, wandered the room, smiled, and wrote in the notebook was someone else? And if that someone kept stealing her memories, who would be left in the end? The holes in her memory were growing, days blurred together. She could no longer fully remember who she used to be, what she loved, or even which street she lived on. Things she once knew slipped from her mind like grains of sand falling through her fingers. Now, when she looked into the mirror, she wasn't sure if the person staring back was really her. From the very beginning of this nightmare, she had tried to make sense of it. She had searched for logical explanations: sleepwalking, a psychological disorder, maybe the aftermath of a severe trauma. But there were no logical explanations left. The thief took a little more every night, and the person left behind. Who was she? At last, she decided to reach out to someone from her past. As long as she could still remember them, she scrolled through the numbers in her phone, but they all seemed foreign. Not a single name felt familiar. Yet she sent a message to someone, perhaps by instinct. Hours later, they met at a cafe. The woman sitting across from her studied her carefully. There was a mix of concern and fear in her eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked. Mia frowned. "Why wouldn't I be?" But at that moment, something shifted in the woman's face. It was as if she had noticed something hiding in the shadows. She flinched, her eyes widening. She pushed her chair back. The woman's voice trembled. "You're not Mia." A chill ran through Mia's spine. "What are you talking about?" "Of course I am. I'm Mia." But the woman kept retreating. The only thing in her eyes now was fear. "No," she whispered, voice unsteady. "You used to be Mia, but you're not her anymore." Something twisted in Mia's chest, and in that moment, the last veil in her mind lifted. She closed her eyes, searching deep within her memory, her childhood, her family, her past. But no matter how hard she tried, all she found was emptiness, as if all those memories were nothing more than a faded dream. Who am I? When she returned home, the question echoed in her mind, gnawing at her thoughts. Every night she woke up at 03:12. But who was waking up? When she stood in front of the mirror, was the thing staring back really her? Maybe Mia was already gone, and whatever had taken her place. What was it? So 3 to 12 a.m. that night, she knew she would wake up. She stood before the mirror, watching as the clock approached 03:12. And the very moment it did, her reflection moved. She had not stirred, but the figure in the mirror tilted its head slightly to the side. Its lips curled upward. It smiled. And that face did not belong to Mia. The thief had stolen one last thing: her identity.